Today we're going to be taking a look at the Acer Aspire V15 Nitro Black Edition. It's called the V15 because this is the 15-inch version sporting an IPS 60Hz 15.6-inch panel that's manufactured by LG. It also has a contrast ratio of 1039:1 and an 85% sRGB color rating. Given those specs, it should offer a good balance for professionals as well as gamers. The IPS panel has excellent colors and viewing angles as one would come to expect from in-plane switching technology. Unfortunately, we do not get G-Sync on this laptop variant, which would have been a welcome addition, although that could add to the price tag, which sits at $1299 for this configuration. There is also a 17-inch version for $1,699, and both variants have the same 1080p resolution, Intel i7 7700HQ processor, and 6GB GPU in the form of the NVIDIA GTX 1060. The memory here is 16GB of DDR4 at 2400 MHz, but you could upgrade that to 32GB yourself if you install 2 additional SODIMMs. On the storage front, we've got a 256GB SSD for the boot drive that had enough space for my most used applications and slower loading games like GTA 5. And for all of your bulk storage, there is a 1TB mechanical drive that is provided. I tested the battery life on here under load and during normal web browsing using Battery Eater. While doing normal web browsing and using applications at the desktop, the Nitro lived up to its advertised battery life of just under 6 hours, but during full load testing, that was cut down by more than half, staying on for just under 2.5 hours. The i7 7700HQ on here is clocked at 2.8 GHz out of the box with an advertised turbo boost of 3.8 GHz, but under load with all the cores utilized, it generally sat between 2.8 and 3.4 GHz while hitting 95 degrees Celsius. When the temperature got this high in gaming, I found most of the heat was above the function keys, so it should be out of the way enough to not be a source of discomfort for most people. The GTX 1060 ran considerably cooler under load in games, topping out at 85 degrees Celsius and seeing its boost clock ranging from 1700 to 1800 MHz. I was able to get an overclock of an additional 150 MHz on the core, which would provide a nice bump in performance for games that need it, but I opted to do all of my testing at stock speeds as that's how I feel most laptop users will choose to run their GPU, but for enthusiasts, the overclocking headroom is there if you want it. We will get into gaming performance in just a minute, but first let's take a look at the connectivity and appearance of the laptop. I really can't say enough good things about the aesthetic as it strikes a good balance of elegance with red LEDs thrown in so as to let you know this is a gaming laptop. The red LEDs for the keyboard can be disabled though if you want to. Around the keyboard there is a beautiful brushed aluminum which adds to the weight a little bit, coming in at 5.5 pounds, but also contributes to the quality feeling in the materials being used here. The lid of the laptop is plastic with ridges covering it from end to end, which feels very satisfying in the hands. Overall, I'd have to say I'm extremely pleased with the design that hasn't sought out the aggressive gamer look that's present in so many other notebooks with similar specs. For connectivity, we have a nice offering of ports thanks to Acer omitting a DVD drive, which is something I appreciate as media on discs is becoming less and less prevalent. On the left side, we have a Kensington lock, 2 USB 2.0 ports, headphone and mic ports, as well as an SD card reader. I love having an SD card reader on my laptops as I work with cameras for a living, but I would have preferred they used a USB 3 controller as the speed on here was rather slow, with transfer speeds of just 27 megabytes per second when writing to the SSD. On the right side, we have a charging port for the included AC power brick, gigabit Ethernet, HDMI out, as well as 2 USB 3 ports and a Lightning port over USB Type-C that you can use for faster data transfer than USB 3 or for an external display with a DisplayPort to Type-C cable. The last thing I wanted to mention is the touchpad that feels great. With a matte finish, there are no defined areas for the left and right mouse, but clicking the lower third of the left and right can differentiate your presses. And on the top left here of the touchpad, there is a fingerprint reader that you can use with Windows Hello for sign-in on your operating system. But now that we got all of that out of the way, let's get into the gaming performance. For all of these benchmarks, I used the system in its stock configuration, and all of the games were tested at 1080p on high presets. The GTX 1060 inside here was able to handle demanding games like a champ, powering even some of the most demanding titles as well as popular esports titles. Looking at the chart with the average and minimum FPS, you'll see games like Overwatch, CSGO, and Rocket League are a breeze for this notebook, getting an average over 150 FPS and minimums well over 100 frames per second. MOBAs also should not pose much of a challenge, as Heroes of the Storm 2.0 was able to do 104 average FPS and a minimum of 79 during a live match. More demanding titles like Rainbow Six Siege, The Division, Ghost Recon Wildlands, and Hitman all kept an average over 60 FPS, but a few did have minimums that fell below that, but I found all of these games were still very playable. And in the case of Rainbow Six Siege and other titles here with performance to spare, you can likely increase the graphics options to very high or even ultra and still not fall below 60 FPS. The only games here that really struggled with getting an average of 60 were Deus Ex Mankind Divided and PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, but the latter title mostly comes down to being an early access title that still has a long way to go in terms of optimization. However, I wanted to include it in these charts because of just how popular the game has become in such a short period of time. So in conclusion, I can definitely recommend this notebook for $1,299 in the configuration I tested. The GTX 1060 proved to be more than capable of powering modern games at 1080p, even when paired with a notebook processor in the form of the i7 7700HQ. Combining all of this with a sleek design, numerous connectivity options, strong battery life, and being relatively lightweight at 5.5 pounds, Acer seems to have checked all the boxes for a notebook that I've been looking for at this price point. If you want links to where you can buy the Acer Aspire V15 Nitro, I'll be sure to link to it over on Amazon in the description below. If you enjoyed this review, please don't forget to leave a like and let us know what you think of this offering from Acer down in the comments. I'll look forward to seeing you down there for discussion, and I'll catch you guys next time.